what you're here for, what to look out when moving to the cloud, really. And this will be really the best session you will see in this room, in this minute, and only in the next 49 minutes. So that's it. But who I am very, very quickly, Emanuele, that's how it's pronounced, Italian, working in Switzerland. I'm a data science manager and work with a lot of technology. This is the feedback code that you can scan for later. Anyways, you should get the email, so it's easy, no problem. Let's start right away. What is the cloud? So it's a powerful statement from the founder of Salesforce that says, oh, the cloud, if someone asks what cloud computing is, I try not to bow down. It's simply the better way to run your business. And your face is like, wow. First reaction, shock. And now, today, we are here to see, is it really the case? What do you have to think of when you're going to the cloud? I got the idea from this question because in my adventure at Acer, which now I manage the whole data platform, we had a full migration from our local data center to 100% cloud-enabled data platform. By the way, almost completely on Azure. So that's my background. Danger, before we really start, this is a session to evaluate if the cloud is a good choice for your company, because remember, there is no perfect choice for everybody. Unfortunately, you will leave this session with even more questions than before, because I'm going to show you how many questions, how many attributes, how many features, if you want to say like a data scientist, you have to evaluate in order to achieve a successful cloud migration. So, sorry, you will have more questions than when you come in through that door. So, you're welcome. Let's try to avoid a waste of resources, and let's go. First thing first, bear with me for a second, because we have to, a small refresher of a non-technical aspect first. So, very quickly, I know you all know these things, but let's refresh it. So, the concept of capital expenditures versus operational expenditure, AKA, why does your management want to go to the cloud? That's basically why. They want to go to the cloud because it's easier to justify an operational expenditure versus a capital one, because with the capital expenditure, you need to go higher level and have it signed by the people with the big decision power. An OPEX can be easier to get through the door when you have your budget already defined. And the differences you can see on screen, the CapEx is like lump sum. We have to buy a data center, we have to buy X amount of servers, and the OPEX is the going on of the cost day by day that they can accrue, basically your subscriptions and other kinds of costs. But in the cloud is basically the subscription. Different types of cloud services, again, very basic, but I'm trying to bring everybody down from the level up to the cloud. We have infrastructure as a service, where you try to get rid of the physical hardware. So you still have the same tools, but without your hardware. You're using the vendor hardware. Platform as a service, where you abstract even the software installation and configuration. Think about Azure SQL or SQLMI or stuff like that, AWS RDS platform, where you use the product that you want, or the higher level of abstraction is a software as a service, where you basically just have the software. You log in and use the software as it is, like Office 365, SharePoint, stuff like that. And at this point, you will get a little bit scared, like this scared Pikachu that says, are they going to try to get rid of you too? That is a possibility, but don't worry, little Pikachu. We will show you how not to get destroyed. Okay, step one. New companies and the cloud. I won't be talking much about new companies at the cloud, because if you are a new company and you'd have that much capital, it's probably a best approach to just start in the cloud, because you don't have upfront architecture, you have lower capital risk, because one thing is say, okay, give me $10 million, and then let's build this data center to do this application that nobody has an idea if it will succeed. And another thing is, okay, let's try 1,000 a month and see if it works. And if it doesn't, shut it off. So it lowers your risk of capital expenditure. It allows you to create a faster MVP, so your product, because you click two things and you have your infrastructure up. instead of ordering, getting, installing, setting up, installing operating system, patches, software configuring, etc. It's faster. It's simply faster. So you can spin up whatever you want, and you can also pivot however you want, because you have something, it doesn't work, shut it down, rebuild. This is one of the greatest things of the cloud, speed. And also as a business model, if anybody wants to do the entrepreneur one day, SaaS has a lot of margin. So if you want to do something as a SaaS starting up, because later it will be different, it's a good model for starting your new business. But most of us here already have a job, so probably you're most interested in the existing company and the cloud approach. So here, again, you start with the questions. There are no answers, just questions. The questions are, what is my goal? Am I trying to save money? Am I trying to create a new product that maybe needs a different infrastructure? Do I need faster performance? So think about that. Also, how does my current infrastructure looks like? Because remember, all of this, you have to integrate with your current infrastructure and to see, why am I doing this? Is it because my hardware is end of life, or it is just slow? Are you saying, oh no, this query takes too long to run, oh no, this process, it takes too long, I need to go to the cloud to get it faster? Chill. Don't do it right away. Maybe it's good, maybe not. And also, don't ever forget your people, because here we talk about technology all the time, but people are also very important, because you cannot just impose to your people, oh yes, use this technology, and maybe nobody likes it. Nobody is able to do it, and maybe you had a lot of people that were bare metal lovers, and then they have no idea what to do in the cloud. And if you go to the cloud, you have to invest also in their training. Don't expect that magically everything works, and the people that you have magically are grateful for you and your new cloud technology, because probably they won't be. Or maybe yes, you don't know. Only questions today. Let's check now numbers. I won't read every step of this, because remember, you will have the slides online, everything is recorded, so don't catch anything now, absorb it slowly, try to get the core points. But basically here in the state of the cloud, you can see that a lot of the companies around the world say that they want to go to cloud, but cloud spending is an issue, because remember 10 years ago, cloud is cheaper. Nobody has ever said that. Today, you will see why. And everybody's basically have struggles, and they want to optimize the processes, and they want to optimize the workflow, and they waste around 30% of their capital on the cloud, which they could do better. And today, also, you can do better if you already are in the cloud by evaluating everything that we have. One thing you can evaluate is, should I have multiple cloud vendors? Again, a list of questions. There is an article I wrote online. If you search multiple cloud and plus my name, you'll find the article right away. You can read it very, very slowly without having to bother too much right now. But basically, you have pros and cons between having everything in the same cloud versus using multiple cloud vendors. With everything in the same cloud, you can imagine, maybe I have more, so I get more discount from my vendor. Maybe it's better integrated, because, for example, if I have everything Microsoft, it's easier to enter ID through everything, SSO, etc. And maybe everything is closer together, because you spin up instances in the same region of the same cloud vendor in the same availability zone, and then maybe things are faster. On the other way, you're forced to use what you have, because on the other way, maybe the other vendor has a better service. You don't know. And if your provider starts with a G, maybe they are going to dismiss your service without telling you, because somebody's famous for dismissing services that a lot of people are still using. We're not making any names today. And on the other hand, by using multiple cloud vendors is like differentiating your investment. You have multiple streams of revenue. So the optimization of the gain maybe can be lower, but also your risk can be lower. So you have to balance all of this, because then you have maybe higher cost, and then you have to take care of the networking and the authentication and the egress fees. There is a chapter on its own for egress fees. We will see. So again, questions, only questions. Having said so, 92% of enterprises, myself included, are on a multi-cloud strategy. So because there is always something that needs to run in something else. So don't be afraid to integrate, but of course with a grain of salt. Don't do just everything just because, but think about it. Another thing about the cloud in general is the speed. Because, for example, I just scrolled through the Azure blog and I counted, and I see at least 50 updates per quarter in the last few years. And they were like, oh my God, all of these changes are difficult to follow, because if you're on-prem, you're like, oh yes, my hardware is the same. I will think about new one in 5 years. Who cares? I have SQL Server 2008. It's okay. In the cloud, you get a new version every 2 weeks. A new feature, something changes, but you don't need to panic that much. You can calm, because most of the changes don't require you to do basically anything. I mean, there is some opt-in feature, something else new you can use, but usually they try to change for the best, and they try not to disrupt your existing workflow. So it's like, cool, I have a lot of changes, but I don't have to bother. And usually, if they don't break anything, it should be better. So that's the idea. As I just said before, as a spoiler, the cloud is not supposed to be cheaper. It's just a cheat code against bare metal. As far as with every abstraction, if you have something that you can tune perfectly yourself, could be better. But here we are just doing an abstraction on top of an abstraction to try to exploit somebody else's economies of scale, because maybe Microsoft has more servers than you, maybe Amazon, maybe other people, but it's convenient. And it gives you a lot of flexibility and ability to spin up and spin down services as fast as possible. But again, in the list, you don't see cheap. It can be cheaper, but it's not supposed to be cheaper, because if you put another level of abstraction on top of something, why should not pay for it? You're paying for an added value. So it can be, it's not supposed to. Okay, let's stop with the plain old stuff. Let's go into something more actionable for you. The data lake trap. So something I've seen a lot of time. Maybe is not an opinion that's shared by most of the people in the vendor community, but I've seen it, and there is an article that proves that I'm not crazy. So you can read the article. And basically, most of the data lake project, I would say data lake, I would say big data, the whole big petabyte scale infrastructure that you see, most of the time, it fails. So be careful. If you have a bunch of relational databases that do their job pretty fine, and you just need something more powerful, you don't need to discard everything and put on a petabyte Hadoop server with distributed sharding data. Maybe not. Maybe yes. Maybe not. Usually, historically, 60 to 85% of this kind of project fail. I'm not saying not to do it. I'm saying evaluate very, very critically what do you need in your company. Ask yourself, what is the problem that I'm trying to solve? Because here the traps continues. You can see here are very, very little, because I didn't fit in the slides. But you can see there are a lot of small pieces. That's the typical architecture that cloud vendors suggest to you. They say, of course, you need to process this receipt data. Of course, you need 8 services with 50 steps and all of these real-time processing. And you're like, OK, chill, mister. Maybe I don't need that. Maybe you do. Probably you don't need that. Every time I did the call with all the cloud vendors. I did the call with AWS, with Azure, with Google. We also did Oracle. Don't do it. But everybody tries to sell you everything. So don't fall in the upselling trap. Because remember that the cloud is flexible. You're not committing for a data center. You're committing for the cloud. And the point of the cloud is I can do whatever I want with a click of the mouse. So try with the smallest set of elements that you may need, the simplest architecture as possible. And then if it's not enough, you get it bigger. What's the problem? You just click 2 buttons and you make it bigger. So don't fall, don't think like the old days, like in your data center, oh, I have to buy the hardware capability for the next 5 years because then I will scale and I need so. No, in the cloud is the opposite. In the cloud, you buy as small as possible, because if you need tomorrow to get bigger, you click a button, and in minutes or hours or days, depending on the service, you can scale up immediately. So it goes on the other end. You don't have to think about the future load and scale for that, but you have to think about the optimal architecture for your single use in that moment in time. So it's a paradigm shift, because they are spending money on their architecture, their hardware. You don't spend money on hardware, you spend money in them, and you want to optimize everything in your little box, nothing more. Another thing is that, sorry, probably your apps need to change. I say probably because everything depends. That's the key word for our speakers here. It always depends. Your apps need to change? Probably yes. Why? Because usually, when you just bring your apps as is to the cloud, could be not the most efficient thing. Then we'll see a lot of why and how it can happen, et cetera, et cetera. So usually, when you just bring it up, it may not be the optimal. I'm not saying not to do it as is. You can start, because again, the cloud is flexible. So don't think all or nothing. Don't think, oh, if I don't have this feature in the cloud, then I cannot go to the cloud. Little by little, piece by piece, but your apps may need to change. For example, when you're lifting and shifting, think, Mark, because you have to think about a lot of things. Let's say, as you can see, the lift and shifting is a classic business move. Like your business gets from the CEO, oh yes, we have to go to cloud. Then you lift all your machines from on-prem to cloud. They say, yes, we're cloud first, finished, and he gets the bonus. No, that's cheating. Because if you only lift and shift, you're not getting everything out of the cloud. I mean, you get some, if it makes sense, but you're not getting everything. So be careful. It can be a short-term solution, or even a solution that's pretty much definitive for a lot of applications, but surely not for all of them. It's a good move for end-of-life hardware. If your hardware is literally exploding and you don't want to buy the new one in bulk, okay, just bring it up and avoid the capital expenditure. Have it as a subscription, especially if your application is going to die in 1 or 2 years. It's good. You'll avoid having a lot of services running around and having to throw them away. And remember that you're renting the hardware of somebody else. So if you already have good hardware that will live for years, and it's perfect for your workload for the next 5 years, think. Because maybe you're fine. Maybe you don't need to go. Maybe you need to go in 5 years. Maybe you need to go with your next project. Maybe you need to go with another piece of infrastructure. Because if I have something that works perfectly and it's supported and can go around, why should I migrate? Maybe yes, maybe not. So remember, you are always on somebody else's server. And remember, whenever I need to scale up and down, think, do I already have the biggest server that I can ever need already in my premise? If yes, maybe it doesn't make sense. But there are difficult questions to answer, because when talking to prediction to the future, of course, we can only speculate, but always think. This is a favorite of mine for the cloud, because you're used to have your machines sitting down your desk. Oh, yes, this is my data center down my desk, and all the servers close to you, and you go downstairs and you have your servers. Now your servers are in another country, or if they are your country from the other side or whatever, connected to a public backbone or whatever. So the network becomes a very important part for your performance, for your SLA, for your security, for everything. And expect latency. I'm not saying latency is bad in the cloud, because those are the services that keep the world online. So they have the best service and the best connectivity. But physics exists. So if you have a server that's like 10 meters from you, maybe the latency is less than the data center in another country. And if your application is due to send 3 million packets per second to the server down the hall, maybe doing the same thing 200 kilometers away is different because, unfortunately, the speed of light is limited. So there is something to be aware of. But I guess all of you did elementary school, so everybody knows that speed of light, that's it. So verify how chatty your application is and verify how the network changes impact your application. That's something that can bite you really, really hard, so be very careful. I've seen a lot of times, the egress fees that everybody forgets. So you're not on your good old data center down the hall when bandwidth is free, basically, and you call the network guy to fix things. Here, for some reason that I cannot really explain, getting data into the cloud, it's super easy, and it's free. And then for some reason, getting data out of the cloud, they make you pay for it. It's, I don't know, genius business, and that explains why they are trillion-dollar companies. For example, remember, data ingress is mostly free for everybody. Data egress, that's the name for the data coming from your specific cloud resource to something else, you pay for it. There are different pricing. You go to each vendor website and you check for networking bandwidth cost. But for example, in Azure, you have these cost samples that I calculated here for you, just to give you a ballpark. So if you have a heavy data application that is sending data out a lot, think about where are you sending it, why, and how much are you going to spend? Because today you have a data center, you just send the data. Yes, of course, send. Tomorrow, if it's in the cloud, you pay for the bandwidth in egress. So be very careful. Everybody forgets about egress. I don't know why. As long as you don't get the first bill and then you never forget about egress. So that's the fun of egress. Also, you also pay for traffic between the cloud itself. And I'm not talking between Amazon and Microsoft and Google. No. I'm talking about if you have a server in Azure and you have the same server in another Azure region, you pay for the traffic, and that's okay. There are two countries, usually a lot of road between the two. But also, the same region, if you have different availability zone, and we will see later a little bit better what I'm talking about, you also pay for that. A little bit less, but you still pay. So remember, be careful, because otherwise we have the first trivia of today, that is, what happens if somebody gives you a denial of service attack? You get the bill. I mean, not really, but it happened. For example, an unfortunate user on Reddit just last week used a cloud service called Netify, which is just a layer on top of AWS. There are a lot of cloud vendors, not just the big three. And he got a 100K bill for a static website because somebody has decided, let me go to this website and download an MP3 file that he had lying around, just because. And just because he had 100K for a free project that he was paying like $10 a month to keep it online. Of course, then this got famous, and then the CEO got involved, and the bill was put under the rug. But maybe you don't get as lucky. So you need to take care also on these cases. Have you ever thought that if you get attacked, you even pay more? See, a lot of questions, a lot of consideration today. Then for us Europeans, so sorry for the UK now, but it's really valid everywhere. I have some post-DCA news, so it's the new act from the European Union that basically has forced all the major cloud vendors, in this case, Microsoft and Google already have the post online. And basically they said, if you close your cloud account, you are not going to pay for the egress fees. So imagine that you have everything in the cloud, you get tired, and you want to dump all of your data on-prem or to another cloud because somebody has given you a better offer. Before, you had to pay. You have 4 petabytes of data, you pay for 4 petabytes of egress to the other cloud. Since last week, luckily, this won't happen anymore. So thanks EU for once, just once. We have the free egress in case you shut down completely the subscription that you are using in the cloud. So it's a good news in case you want to do cross-cloud migration, or you want to do repatriation, which is going from cloud back on-prem, or you just want to shut down your services or whatever. You want to take a full backup of everything before going away. Who knows? I have a small tip for you. Not all cloud vendors have you pay the egress fees. For example, Cloudflare, that you may know because they do a lot of things about networking and basically they sustain the internet for all of us to enjoy. They do not have you pay egress because basically they own all the CDN in the world, basically, so it's easy for them, but it's very good because, for example, they have a service called R2 that is the S3 of Cloudflare, where you can store your data and have it fetched out for free. So if you want to be clever, you want to serve a lot of data to your customers, maybe you have everything in the cloud of your choice, and then you dump it to R2, and then from R2 you can serve it whatever. You don't pay for egress, which is a good thing. So you have to strategize. You have to think about what do I have to do with my data, what's going on, and choose the best. And this is, again, going on back to the multi-cloud environment of before. In this case, if I have this pattern of data access, it makes sense for me to have something like this. Absolutely. Before I was talking about regions, availability zones, etc. So very, very quickly, the region is a logical idea of a place. For example, we have West Europe, Northern Italy, Switzerland South, etc. In each region, you have at least 3 data centers. Each of these data centers is called availability zone. So the physical hardware is in one availability zone. They are all connected with redundant network connectivity, different power lines, different water, different everything, and all together they make a region. Why am I telling you all of this? Because of course you have to control where your data is. And there is the typical conundrum where you cannot get it right because it depends exactly on your specific use case for that specific data that you have. Because, for example, it will be good to have region exclusivity because the traffic that goes extra region, so the traffic that goes out of the region, is the most expensive. So if I keep it in the same region, it's better. But what if you need multiple regions? Region proximity, it's the best because if you take your data and it's closest to you, speed of light is still limited. So the closest this array of data centers is to you, the lower the latency. So you have to balance all of this. But also you want to balance the availability zone exclusivity because, as I said before, you pay for traffic between availability zone in the same region. So maybe you want to have everything in the same availability zone to save money. But if your application requires a higher availability, more than 3 nines, maybe in the same availability zone, you need to distribute to more. So it's always a balancing. Do I put everything there and I save money, or do I have to spread out? Do I am close to me, or do I have to be close to the customer? Because the closer the region to the customer, their latency is lower. The closer to you, your latency is lower. The more availability zone, the more reliability, the less the cost. And also, of course, there is also geo-replication. Is your data critical? Then I have to be replicated all over the regions. In that case, it costs you more. So it's a lot of balancing. It's a mess, guys. So then I have a bonus tip. Read this online later. That you can do stuff like take something from somewhere, copy there, and exploit something that the provider has forgotten to fix. And then just read the article later by Daniel. It's amazing. Again, scaling services is not trivial because I'm saying the cloud is not cheaper, but at least you are fast because you can spin up, spin down, and scale services very quickly. That's right. But how these services scale? Can it be turned off? Because some things cannot be turned on and off. Most, yes, some no. So some you pay constantly, even if you don't use it. How long does the scaling take? Because you can imagine, of course, it scales. I click this button, it goes down. No, some services takes hours to scale from one size to another, even if they are very similar SKUs, regardless. And then you have to think, but does my application support horizontal scaling, or I need to bake it to the data layer? So another thing to consider, if your application can be scaled horizontally, that's good. If you need the server to get bigger, it's another. How long it stays online, how long is the break in the scaling configuration, all things you have to consider. Again, only questions today, yes, sorry. So again, depending on the service, and this is very service specific, so you have to go look at the documentation of the specific service that you're targeting, and you need to see how it scales. Does the service goes down completely and then goes up, or you have an endpoint in front and you don't see any downtime? And how much time does it break when I scale it? That's not something that, of course, your vendor says, because if the service goes down for 2 hours, maybe you want to know, but the vendor doesn't want you to know at the first impact, no? Then you have to see, you have to check about also if it scales automatically or it doesn't, and configure it programmatically. So again, it's a lot of stuff. Scaling is not trivial. You have to consider why, how, am I scaling horizontally, vertically, circularly? Doesn't exist, but it's the same. Then something that is very, very dear to me is the performances, because finally, you have the power to control the performances, because the performance are literally money on the cloud. Because remember when I told you that you scale your services exactly as you need it, and then worst case you scale it up, there are only 2 reasons that you want to scale up. One good reason, if you make more money, you have more customers, your application grows, and then it's a good reason. The other reason is you have performance issue and something is going wrong, and then you need to scale up to fix it. As you can see, the bad reason is bad because it costs you more money. So now your role in performance optimization can be targeting the core value of the business, which is money. So optimizing your workload, optimizing your query, your database, your requests, et cetera, is very, very powerful in the cloud, because it allows you to scale your services exactly as you need it and not wasting any resources. Of course, you can have a buffer because you never know what's going to happen. But if the buffer is limited and your performance are consistent and your queries are reliable and everything else is in order, you can save a lot of money just not by throwing hardware at your problem. So finally, you can say, yes, boss, we need to invest on query optimization because you can scale down the database and we will save a lot of money because that's the truth. So again, remember to do like this. And don't be like this guy, because this is you. This is the DBA, if some of you are DBA, that tells the developer, your query sucks. And then they say, no, they want more CPUs because, typical developers are like, I don't care how this application needs to run. I don't know why developers usually, at least my developers, don't care about performance very much, only very few. And they just want to scale. And you say, fix your query. And they don't want to fix it. But now you have the power. If you don't fix your query, this is going to cost more. And so you suck. Go fix your query, and we will save money for the company. So that's a very powerful statement that you finally can say to your developer. You can get back and say, no, we won't get any hardware. Fix it, otherwise, this is the amount. It will be deducted from your salary. You don't like it. One small note about IOPS, because the cloud is very famous for having storage, which is very cheap. It started with S3, basically, back in the day. And now we have a lot of things. And so a lot of cloud storage is around. But please mind the IOPS. So I have an example that it was mostly fixed today, luckily. Because, for example, I have a lot of pain with Azure SQL MI, which up until today, the general purpose queue had some issues with IOPS. So if you take like a dumpster server on-prem, usually you buy a $15 SSD, you attach to it, it's super fast. You can literally go to the supermarket to buy it, and it's fast. If you go to the cloud, up until this morning, general purpose, it's as slow as a USB key card, probably slower. And so you can imagine that you have a high throughput application, you need to write a lot of things to the transaction log and to the files around. Maybe it was not the best. There were tricks around it that I exploited, but again, come on, you make me pay SQL Server license and I get this number of IOPS. Back in the day, up until this morning, you had to do this trick of reading the documentation. Again, don't forget to read the documentation, even if it's long, but now you have Copilot to sum it up, so you can ask him. Up until this morning, you had to change the size of the data file in order to get more IOPS out of it. Doable, but of course now you're paying more storage that you don't need just to have the IOPS that you need. So it's really a balance. From this morning, they released the next gen general purposes, where basically now you pay directly for the IOPS. So at least you can scale the IOPS directly without having more storage that you don't use. So it's pretty good. Thank you, SQLMI team, for what you did for me. Then I personally have some reservation on reservations. And not only because it's a good joke, but also because generally reserving capacity on the cloud is a good idea, because if you have something that stays there, you got a lot of discount. It's like 40 to 60% discount of the total cost of ownership, which is good. Saving money is good. It's one of the things I like the most in my life. But evaluate if this makes sense, because make sure that your resource stays online for more time than the discount. For example, if I have a VM and I can shut it down 50% of the time because I don't need it, why should I reserve it for a 40% discount? I shut it off 50% of the time and I save 10%. You can see squeezing money out of everything. This is the core. If you're going to the cloud, use it as the cloud. It's not like on your old on-prem where you have the VM, up or down, you're paying the hardware, you're paying the electricity regardless. Here, you're paying on demand. So remember to exploit it, absolutely. Measure your current workload, because you never know. And make sure that for the whole reservation period, which is usually 1 or 3 years, you're going to need this machine with this capacity. Because, of course, if you reserve it for 3 years and then you say, oh, no, I need something smaller, it's too late. You have to pay until the end. Something bigger, do you pay more? Of course, it's doable. Something smaller, not really. So be careful. And one last thing, if it's called reservation, it's the reservation of the price, not of the resource itself. It's still shared on the cloud with everybody. You're not buying dedicated hardware. You're buying the price reservation. It's a contract for your finance guys, not an hardware dedicated to you for the whole period. Then, storage. Again, storage is cheap in the cloud. Everybody knows it. I already said it. But remember that it's very easy to bring data in. It's difficult to get data out. And so be very careful how much data you really have on the cloud. One, because if you need to take it out and you're not shutting down everything, you pay a lot of money. You can ask NASA that paid $12 million getting their data out of the cloud at the end of their contract. They forgot to calculate the egress fees, but that's NASA. That's the US population that's paying for. You are not the US government, unfortunately. But exploit also here the different types of data access. Basically, you have from hot to archive, and in the middle you have cold and cool. Basically, the higher you go, the faster the data access is, and so the more the storage itself costs. The lower you go, the slower the storage, and the lower the cost, of course. But when you do access, it costs you a little bit more. We are talking fraction of cents, but calculate in your overall life how much these accrue. So don't forget to, oh yes, of course, this is very easy, but if you wait long enough, it will get expensive. That's their plan all along, to get you a petabyte of data in the cloud and get $1 million from you in fees. Again, one last thing is, if your data really needs to stay there, does it need to stay raw, or you can aggregate it? Think about the value of your data. So another question. Control and kill. Here, remember, creating resources in the cloud, it's very, very easy. But it's as easy as forgetting it. So it's easy, just click the button, create a VM. Of course I want it, and then you forget about it. Don't do it, because they continue to bill you. Even if you say, pretty please forgive me, they won't. Now, maybe sometimes, but not always. So review your spending every month, possibly, at least once a quarter. Come on. And then keep an eye on your resource inventory. So do not let anything run wild and burning up your budget. Speaking of budget, set a budget just in case someone attacks you and then you get astronomical fees. At least it's capped to a known value. And then once it's capped, you see what's going on. And also, sometimes your vendor can also get your bill wrong. It can happen with some customers that they are using Cosmos DB. Customer may or not be me. I'm not confirming or saying anything. Then I have another trivia here, which is the things you can say to your cloud vendor, but not to your partner in bed. And of course, we now understood that you cannot say, I want it to be fast and cheap. Probably you can say to the cloud vendor too. Let's get to your role now. How are you going to say this to the vendor? Your role, if you're a DBA, talking with DBAs here, if you're a DBA, there is a paradigm shift also here, going from installing, troubleshooting, patching, et cetera, to more of a decision maker. You decide the level of the architecture, you're planning for it, you're managing the cost, because now one query optimization is money saved. So you can say, of course, I'm managing the cost of my company. So you can get fancier with your company and demand a raise because you're contributing to the income of your company. So remember also this. So you can more configuring, optimizing, and managing and define architecture. So this is how you're going to be different in the cloud adventure rather than on-prem. I want to give you some final key takeaways here, because as you may have imagined, the cloud, the vendors are trying to lock you in. They are trying. They're not evil, but they need to make money like all of us. So to avoid it, try and use the most portable tech as possible. Usually for us, it's easier because, for example, if I deploy a Postgres instance in Azure now with PostgreSQL, I can take the backup and take it somewhere else. With Azure SQL, it's similar, but there are limitations about asterisk, which version is compatible with which. So always have an escape plan in case somebody pulls a Broadcom move and you are literally screwed. Because I don't know if you know, Broadcom acquired VMware. And now everybody that bought the lifetime license for VMware on-prem, they were set for life. Broadcom came in and said, no, we don't do that anymore. Now you have to pay from now on. So vendors can do it. Probably not, but keep a door open in case of this possibility, because you never know. It's also in your job, the task to keep safe everything you have. So set budget, set a spending ceiling just in case something goes wrong. You don't want to be the guy that had to work with Netify. And always do your math. Now, I've given you a lot of answers, not any question, not any answer to whatever I just said. But you have to do your math, because sit down a lot of time, take out the documentation, go to the pricing calculator of each and every cloud vendor, do the calls. They always want to do the calls with you. Of course, they will show you the mega diagram, but understand the parts of the mega diagram, pick out whatever you need, go to the price calculator of every cloud vendor and say, does it make sense for me or not? What is my goal? What is my workload? What the hell am I even here doing? Why I want to move to the cloud? Does it make sense for me? Only you know, because there is not one answer. I cannot say, even if I'm 100% cloud, I cannot tell you, oh, you have to go to the cloud right away, because I need to know your business, I need to know your existing architecture, and I need to know your people. Remember the people. Talking about people, this is you. You're doing a good job, because keeping up is pretty important. So being a SQL Bits, of course, it's amazing. So congrats to you for doing this. And remember that the world of learning has changed. If some of you is old enough, like me, you may remember that back in the day, you buy the big book and you look it up, like SQL Server 2012 internals. You just read everything and they say, now, I know everything. I'm set for the next 5 years. That's it. Now, you read the blog post for the new feature of SQL MI, and the next day, you have to change your slides because they changed the stuff this morning during a keynote. So this is the stuff. You know, it's difficult. Again, instead of books, now you have to rely on blogs, vendor, blog post, documentation, events, conferences like this. So good job, amazing idea coming here today. And also, one thing that is powerful is setting up your own instances and mess with it. Azure, I know he has a lot of free resources like SQL MI that I know very well as a free SQL MI that you can use however you want. Other cloud vendors has it. Be very careful setting set spending limits and take your credit card and burn it after you give it to them because you never know. It's risky, but you can set up and work on your own because you cannot buy a data center, but you can buy some cloud services to try it out, and they are eager to do so. Very, very quickly, some Azure-specific tips that are getting smaller and smaller because everybody is getting on the same side. If you don't know, there is something called dev test pricing, which you can use for dev and test. It's amazing. It's basically a subscription. You call your reference and say, this subscription, I want to make it dev test. And basically, you don't pay the licenses. You only pay for the compute. So it's cheaper for your dev and test instances. So you save a lot of money by running your development workload there. Also, I like very much the burstable VM types, the B series, because if you have burstable workload, like ETL running sometimes a day, the burstable are something that you pay a little bit, and they accrue credits for CPU. And then when you use it, you consume it, and they're like, remember the old turbo button on the 386 CPUs? It's the same thing, but with a timer. Turbo, and then they consume the credit, and then you're done. Then you pause, they grow, and then you consume, and it's cheaper. Check the documentation. Also, I already said, check the resources, check that everything is online, do the inventory, all stuff like this. And technically, if you read the documentation, it says that Microsoft is supposed to price match any other cloud vendor if there is a comparable service somewhere else. If it isn't, try asking your contact at Microsoft. They should be able to do something for you. Usually, you get discounts for everything. Remember that the cloud is inevitable, but 50% of Thanos victims survive. So maybe it's you, maybe it's not you. You will never know. So we have 1 minute left. Perfect. Remember to scan the feedback because my mom will be very happy because apparently there is some sort of challenge, whatever, best speaker, something. But since we don't have time for questions, feel free to get me outside wherever, or you can see me on Saturday morning at Ask the Expert. I have no idea how that works, but I'm there, so you can just ask me. So thank you very much for being here.